Here we go. We're off and running. Welcome into the show. You're watching the San Francisco 49ers Report. Chase Sr. here with you. Hopefully everybody out there is having a fantastic day on this beautiful Thursday, October 23rd. We have so much to get to here on the show. A Brock Purdy injury update, a Brandon Aiyuk injury update. Did the Niners upgrade at center? There's a lot of trade buzz that we want to get into. We're going to go through some big changes that the Niners have made on the offensive side of the football, which has led to a better ground game for the Niners the last couple of weeks. Can't wait to take your questions as well. No matter where you are, how you're tuned in, thank you so much for making today's show a part of your day. And we're so glad that all of you are hanging out here with us. So many fantastic content options out there for people who cover the Niners, whether it be podcasting on YouTube, print, digital, radio. So anytime you decide to hang out here with us to get your Niners content, we are very grateful. And I love chopping it up with everybody. So for those of you coming into the live show right now, don't forget to get those questions in. Use the hashtag 49ers or send in a super chat. We already have about 300 people watching live. You've got questions. I've got answers. So we're going to open up the floor for segment number 3 and do that mailbag. And if you're ready to talk some Niners, Let's waste no time. Producer Chip on the ones and twos. Chase Sr. here with you. The Niner Gang rocking and rolling with us from every pocket of America and worldwide. Can't wait to talk some San Francisco 49ers football. So hit that thumbs up icon, like the video if you're ready to go. Shout out to the recent commenter club, B-Town, Roy, Luke, Joseph, Rachel, all in the chat. I see James and John in the comment section as well. Again, as you come in here, continue to hit that thumbs up icon, like the video. We're north with more than 300 people watching live. Let's get that like number to at least 100 in the next 30 seconds. And without further ado, we have a loaded segment with segment number 1, which is coming up just around the corner. Brock Purdy injury update, latest on Brandon Aiyuk. John Lynch was on the radio this morning talking about a potential trade. And then we'll talk about a change that the Niners have potentially looming along the offensive line. Now, it's happened because of an injury, but could it be a permanent change coming up here in just a bit? The official show about to get underway. Bang, bang, Niner Gang. Let's talk some Niners, and let's go. How's it going, everybody? Welcome into the show. You're watching the San Francisco 49ers Report. My name is Chase Sr., and no matter where you are or how you're tuned in, thank you so much for making today's show a part of your day. It's a beautiful Thursday, October 23rd, and we're talking all things Niners because that's what we do here on this show. Coming up, another loaded one on the docket. We have a major Brock Purdy injury update. We have a new Brandon Aiyuk injury update, John Lynch talked about the Niners making a potential trade, and did the 49ers upgrade at the center position? Let's begin here, though. We are almost to 178,000 subscribers right here on the program. We're only 40 people away. So if you want Niners coverage on YouTube, which comes your way every single day year-round, lock us in, hit that sub button, and let's continue to grow the empire here on the 49ers Report. And let's begin with the latest around Brock Purdy. And I'll set the foundation and set the table with this information here on your screen. As we know, Purdy suffered that initial turf toe injury week 1 against the Seattle Seahawks. He had that terrific game-winning drive in week 1 to lift the Niners to a massive NFC West victory against a quality opponent, because I do think the Seahawks are a Super Bowl contender inside this conference. They're that good on both sides of the ball, extremely well coached. I like them from a talent perspective. And Purdy on that game-winning drive, a perfect 6 of 6, playing clutch football. But then after that game, we found out on Monday that he suffered that turf toe injury. Missed a couple of games. Mac Jones came in, and he played brilliantly. Purdy then came back against the Jaguars in week 4 after Mac won his first 2 starts against the Saints and the Cardinals, and he re-aggravated that injury. In the last 2 weeks, Purdy has been limited at practice. He's had his shoulder pads on. He's had his helmet on. He's been doing some throwing drills. This week, he started to ramp up some of his movement, and he looks pretty good. But I will say this. When the Niners beat the Falcons on Sunday Night Football, what a terrific and impressive win that was. There was a report during that broadcast that definitely concerned me. And it came from Melissa Stark, the sideline reporter. And keep in mind that the broadcast crews, they always meet with coaches, teams, and players in the lead up to games. And so they do have some good reports to come to light during these broadcasts because they get some really good information throughout the week. And so Melissa Stark had reported on Purdy that he told her any movement in the wrong direction can set him back. And he said he's truly day-to-day, but there's no timeline for his return. He called this injury so annoying, saying he's never dealt with something that lingers this long. I just don't think that's good. And you also think about this injury too. There are different levels of severity when it comes to the turf toe. Brock Purdy had his injury. He came back too soon. He got hurt again, and it set him back. Joe Burrow in week 2 had turf toe so bad, he had to get surgery. He's out until December. And once Purdy came back against the Jags, he clearly wasn't right in that game. And now we have no idea when he's going to be able to come back. And was there another setback before that game against the Falcons? Because Matt Barrows on The Athletic had reported this, that he was talking to Diana Rossini the other day, and she said that Brock had a workout on Sunday before the Falcons game. He came out of that not feeling so great about his toe. They thought it was going to be a successful workout, something that would launch him towards starting this week in Houston, and it didn't feel great. I think that's the nature of it. I think it's probably worse than what they initially thought it was, or maybe when he played against the Jags, it worsened, but it's obviously not healed yet, and he's still not practicing in full. And we've kind of just been in limbo the last couple of weeks. Last week, Purdy limited. This week, Purdy limited. And so I think there's no chance that Purdy plays against the Texans, obviously. Mac Jones is in line to start again. Next week, the Niners play on the road against the New York Giants. The Texans have a turf surface. The Giants have an infamously bad turf surface. Then the Niners are home against the Los Angeles Rams that following week. So will we see Purdy then? This is the nature of that injury that we really don't know. And obviously, I'm not a doctor, right? But this is an image of what turf toe is. And you can see how difficult this can be for any athlete who has to plant his foot, has to cut, push off that foot, or a player like Brock Purdy who relies on his maneuverability and his mobility to improvise, create plays, and move around. That any bad movement on that turf toe can make that injury even worse. And that's why it's such a fickle injury, one that's so hard to come back from, one that's such a pain in the ass, and one that has such a high risk of re-aggravation. And this is why Purdy should have never played going into that game against Jacksonville. And some people might say, you can Monday morning quarterback, even though I'm recording this on Thursday. You can say hindsight is 2020. I was on live on the Krug Show with Larry Krueger. We were both saying that if Purdy isn't right against Jacksonville, do not play him because of the risk for re-aggravation. And Krug had said that week in practice, Purdy didn't look healthy. He couldn't plant, he couldn't drive, and in practice, he was leaving balls high. In practice, he was overthrowing some of his targets. What happened in the game? Overthrows led to mistakes and interceptions. Purdy was moving around very gingerly on that bad foot, and it turns out he made it even worse. And he didn't need to play in that game. I get it from a competitive standpoint why he would want to play. He just signed that big contract. He saw Mac Jones play well. He wants to be loyal to this organization. He wants to be tough and available for the team and his teammates. But you have to think big picture with stuff like this. You have to think at a macro sense. And to risk Purdy against an AFC opponent early in the year wasn't a smart line of thinking for him or this Niners team. Which brings me to this, right? Where would the San Francisco 49ers be without Mac Jones? He is 4-1 so far this year. Him and Kyle Shanahan have won 4 games for the Niners before Halloween has even hit. And he's been one of the most productive passers in the game. Not only has he revived and resurrected his career, once he leaves the Niners, I think that he can be a legitimate starter somewhere else, and he has legitimately saved the Niners season. And when you scan the moves that all teams across the NFL made this offseason, the 49ers have made 2 of the best and most valuable moves: the hiring of Robert Saleh and the signing of Mac Jones. Because if they had the trot a Brandon Allen or Joshua Dobbs type out there, their season would be over by the end of October. Instead, they're 5-2. They're perfect so far in the division. They've come through with some really clutch wins. And Mac Jones has had a big role in keeping this team's head above water. And he's played awesome, completing 67% of his passes. He leads the NFL in passing yards per game at 280.8. 6 touchdowns, 4 picks, but I think 2 of those interceptions are not on him. And he has a quarterback rating of 89.8. And for a bulk of his time as the starter, Kendrick Bourne, who was let go by the New England Patriots and signed going into week 2, has been his number 1 wideout. Here's what John Lynch said about Purdy this morning, by the way. We're taking the appropriate measures. What I can tell you is he's getting better each week, each day. We're getting closer. That has Brock encouraged. That has everybody encouraged. We've literally heard that for like a month straight, it seems. As for Brandon Aiyuk, it's been a little while since I passed along an Aiyuk update here on the show, but John Lynch on the radio this morning did talk about BA. Keep in mind, he tore his ACL, MCL, and had meniscus damage week 7 of last year. So around this point, a calendar year ago, sometimes players can come back in less than a year from only an ACL. Ayuk's not back a year plus removed from his injury because it was one of the worst injuries that you can suffer. And here's what Lynch said. Oh yeah, there's hope that he plays this year. More importantly than hope, there's some evidence. He's making really good progress. He's been putting in time, and it's coming nearer as to when he's going to be out there on the field. I never thought or bought into Aiyuk being ready for week 1 or being ready the first 6 weeks of the year. I've always kind of been at that halfway point of the year between weeks 8 to 10, and I think that's a decent timeline for BA. And if he can come back and play well, I think a lot of people have forgotten about how good of a player he can be when he's healthy. Obviously, the contract saga wasn't a good look for him, and the Niners instantly regretted giving him that contract, according to a lot of buzz out there. And I don't like how Aiyuk has handled the pre-contract negotiations and the post-contract signing. He also looked terrible to start last year. He was out of shape, wasn't really productive. Was he getting open from time to time? Yeah, but he didn't look like the same player who he was in 2023. And so you take away that 2024 season. It's been a long time, obviously, since Aiyuk played, but the last full season that he played, we're talking about an all-pro here. He was the second highest graded wide receiver in football in 2023, one of the most efficient wide receivers in the game, and one of the most productive on a per target, per catch, per game basis. I mean, he did a lot with a lack of targets and made the most of his opportunities. In 2023, he was tremendous. One of the best route runners with some of the best footwork in the NFL. 75 catches, 1,300 yards, 17.9 yards per catch. That was also number 2 in the NFL, and he had 7 touchdowns. He also went over 1,000 yards in 2022 as well, and he was highly dynamic in 2024. I hope that he can get back to being somewhat healthy because, man, he's a fun player to watch. Will the 49ers beat the Texans on Sunday? That is today's poll question, by the way. It's also the pinned comment of today's 49ers report. Let me know down in the comment section. Type W for win or L for lose. Still to come here on the show, John Lynch talks about the Niners potentially making a trade, and did the 49ers upgrade at the center position? We'll get into that coming up just around the corner. But let's get to our sponsor, our friends at PrizePicks, making today's San Francisco 49ers report possible. Join the millions of users and sign up today on America's #1 fantasy sports app. It's very easy to play. You can get your picks in less than 60 seconds. You choose more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you can win some big-time money. I know all of you know ball. I want you to show me. Turn your takes into cash with PrizePicks. They also have a couple of new features. It's the only app that offers stacks meaning you could pick the same player up to 3 times in the same lineup. Do you want to pick more on Josh Allen's pass yards, rush yards, and touchdowns? Now you can pick all of them in the same lineup, only on PrizePicks. Follow other PrizePicks players directly on the app and copy their lineups in one click. Whether it's a friend, a celebrity partner, or just somebody whose picks you like, hit the follow button and check out every lineup they create in the new feed tab on PrizePicks. And with the stacks, you want to pick more on Christian McCaffrey's rush yards, receiving yards, and touchdowns, you can do that. And something that Chip and I have really liked, the more on the Christian McCaffrey receiving yards. 51.5. It's been on that number over the last couple of weeks, and he's top 10 in receiving yards. So we're going to go more on that again. CJ Stroud more than 200.5 passing yards, and then George Kittle finds the end zone. So here's the deal. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Of course, a big topic of conversation here on the show over the last couple of weeks, Niners trade rumors. Will the 49ers make a move going into the trade deadline? It's November 4th after week 9 going into week 10. And when you have injuries to marquee players, superstar players like Nick Bosa and Fred Warner, a big question for the general manager who pulls the trigger on these types of moves, are you going to make a trade to upgrade the roster? Because Robert Saleh has done a great job of maximizing this defense, but with the Niners being 5-2 right now in a wide-open NFL, wide-open NFC, and an NFC West there to be had, I think he needs to make moves to upgrade the team because longevity-wise, from that sense, it's really hard to continue to play that well without making some moves. And so Lynch this morning on the radio asked about making a move. He said this, quote, "We don't have to, but we have plenty in this building. We'll hold down the fort until Bryce Huff comes back. If it can help our team, we won't hesitate to do it. But nothing has presented itself that aligns completely to this point." And I think what he means by that latter point is that the Niners ideally want a player who can help them now and in the future. And ideally a player who is younger, who isn't going to cost all that much as far as the contract or what the Niners have to give up in order to bring that player in. Now, there has been a little bit of a change in tune from Lynch because a couple of weeks ago, we talked about this on the show. He had said, we've had productive conversations. But one of my worries after the Fred Warner injury, on top of the Nick Bosa injury, was that going to change the Niners' plans on making a trade? You can replace one, you can't replace two. And when you have injuries to two players of that elite level, do you have a ceiling now? Do you realize as an organization, shoot, we might be able to make the playoffs, but our Super Bowl chances without both of them probably shot down. Now, I don't think the Niners do have enough in the building, which is why I continue to say I think Lynch needs to make a move. And especially at the defensive end spot, look at what the Niners have to work with against the Texans on Sunday. Mykel Williams and Sam Okuwano, in addition to Robert Beal, the only players on the 53-man roster at defensive end who are available to play. And then you have Trevis Gibson and William Bradley King on the practice squad. So I think the Niners need to trade for a pass rusher. I think they will trade for a pass rusher. The fact that they are 5-2 in a wide open conference where we don't know definitively who the best team is. And I think the Niners, with their talent, with their depth, with their coaching, can compete with anybody. You got to make a move because you get into the dance and you see what's possible. I mean, look at how jumbled the NFC is. And you think about how the Niners can match up with some of the teams here. Niners against the Packers, I like San Francisco's chances. The Niners can compete with the Philadelphia Eagles. They show that they can compete against the Buccaneers. I think they can compete against the Lions, Seahawks, Rams, Bears, Panthers, Cowboys. And obviously, there's some head-to-head matchups, which we'll see from here on out until the end of the year. But John Lynch, make a move at pass rusher. Not necessarily a move at linebacker as well, because I like the young players there. Tatum Bethune's a baller. Nick Martin has a lot of ability, but if you do trade for a pass rusher, it helps out the rest of the defense. There's also this topic that I want to hit. Did the 49ers upgrade at the center spot? And obviously it's unfortunate anytime a player goes down, but I've never been a huge fan of Jake Brendel. I think that he's a completely average center. He was playing well before he hurt his hamstring against the Atlanta Falcons, but you saw a difference in athleticism when Matt Hennessy, a former third-round pick, replaced him. You saw higher upside for this offense with Hennessy at center over Jake Brendel. And obviously the Niners really like Brendel, but I think that Hennessy has more potential to allow this offense to maximize itself as a unit. And Hennessy was very impressive against Atlanta. I'm excited to see what he can do against Houston. 20 pass blocking snaps, no sacks allowed, 1 pressure allowed, 0 quarterback hits allowed. His pass blocking efficiency, 97.5. His pass blocking grade, 79.2. His run blocking grade, 64.1. And he'll have a couple of games to prove himself, Will Hennessy. And this is what John Lynch said about him. So Jake Brendel has been a really consistent stalwart for us right at the core. You just count on him being out there every week. He got his hamstring injured, and it's going to be a couple of weeks. But just like having Mac Jones or a guy who can go in and play like a starting high-level starting quarterback, Matt Hennessy was a really good pickup for us. He came in, played at a high level. We trust him, and I commend him on how he went out there and performed. And I just think that Hennessy can be the better player as compared to Jake Brendel to make this offense better. Don't forget to give me a follow on X and Instagram, by the way. I'm giving you daily Niners shows right here on YouTube on the 49ers Report and additional coverage on my social media pages as well. Good stuff there for segment number 1. Segment number 2 is another loaded one. Shout out to everybody who's in the comment section right now. Willie Rodriguez, Joseph Gould, Go 49ers, Jay Menino, Daniel Garcia, AVG Paulo. I see ya. By the way, if you have a question for our mailbag segment, that's coming up for segment number 3. I want to talk Niners. I want to open up the floor, and I want to see what you have to say, what you have to ask me. So it's very easy to get involved with our Q&As. Within your comment here in the live chat, just use hashtag 49ers or send in a super chat. Chip, how are we doing on that front?
Yeah, only a couple questions so far. Shout out to Chua. Shout out to Jeremiah Grady getting questions in there, but can't do a mailbag with 2 questions, baby. Use that hashtag. Get your questions in. Trade deadline just a couple of weeks away. A lot going on. You know, we're in the thick of things in the NFL season. So get those questions in. Make sure to use that hashtag in your question or send in a super chat.
You heard it from the man, the myth, the legend, producer Chip. Get those questions in. Hashtag 49ers or send in a super chat. A lot of trade buzz around this football team right now. We're going to get to that with segment number 2. Who are some players who the Niners could target going into the deadline to improve this defense? There are also some offensive players who we're going to talk about as well. That's coming up here. Segment number 2, live on the San Francisco 49ers Report. It is a Thursday, October 23rd. Our coverage and our show rolls on. I'm looking forward to diving into segment number 2 right here.
Look at Jay right there getting that question in. And the Who Kid, just copy them. You know, same thing they did. Hashtag 49ers, ask your own question. That's it. Simple as that.
W. Madsick would love a tour of the studio. I need a vacation. Got to go back to work. Much love, my man. Appreciate you. By the way, did you ever get your jersey? If not, shoot me an email, chase@chatsports.com. Let me know. Haven't heard from you in a little while. All right, segment number 2 coming up. Let's get into it. This is the San Francisco 49ers Report. Chase Senior hanging out here with you. And no matter where you are, how you're tuned in, as always, thank you so much for making today's show a part of your day. Coming up here over the next several minutes, obviously with the injuries to Nick Bosa and Fred Warner, the trade rumors have been picking up a lot of momentum and a lot of steam around this football team. And according to ESPN's Jeremy Fowler, the Niners were interested in a lot of the top trade targets across the NFL. And he put together a list of the top 25 players who are most likely to get dealt, and the Niners are tied to a lot of those players. So the NFL trade deadline coming up after Week 9, going into Week 10, the specific date in which teams need to complete a trade by November 4th. So that's quickly approaching as we're entering the final stretch of October. The Niners bye week, by the way, it's a late one here in 2025, Week 14. So the next couple of games going into the trade deadline, San Francisco on the road against the Texans, on the road against the New York Giants. Then after that is the deadline. And Jeremy Fowler connecting the Niners to 8 of the top 25 trade targets. Now, I want to run through this list 1 through 25, and then we'll get to the players who the Niners are linked to, and we'll run through this list pretty quickly as far as those top trade candidates. Trey Hendrickson, pass rusher for the Bengals. Jalen Waddle, wide receiver for the Dolphins. Breece Hall, running back for the Jets. Reek Woolen, cornerback for the Seahawks. Jacoby Myers, wide receiver for the Raiders. And obviously, a lot of these players are on bad teams who could look to sell going into the deadline. Tight end Mark Andrews of the Baltimore Ravens. Chris Olave, wide receiver for the Saints. Jalen Phillips, pass rusher for the Dolphins. Alante Taylor, cornerback for the Saints. Jermaine Johnson, edge rusher for the Jets. Logan Wilson, linebacker for Cincinnati. Michael Carter II, slot corner for the Jets. Former Niner Arden Key, a pass rusher for Tennessee. Roger McCreary, a cornerback also with the Titans. You got Chigo Okwankwu, the tight end for Tennessee. Arnold Ebiketie, edge rusher for Atlanta. Braxton Jones, offensive tackle for the Bears. Kingsley Enagbare, edge rusher for the Green Bay Packers. Russell Wilson, quarterback for the Giants. Cam Taylor-Britt, cornerback for the Bengals. Kirk Cousins, the number 2 quarterback behind Michael Penix for Atlanta. Kyle Duggar, safety for the Patriots. Jerome Ford, running back for the Browns. Christian Harris, linebacker for Houston. And Evan Neal, the offensive tackle and guard for the New York Giants. The Giants over the last couple of years have used him at tackle and at guard. And so you think about the Niners' top needs right now. Obviously, the pass rush is a bigger need for me as compared to a linebacker, even though Fred Warner is the more valuable player to Nick Bosa because pass rushers are harder to replace than linebackers. And if you can generate pressure on the quarterback, what does it do? It helps out your linebacking core. I'm going to put linebacker on the screen as another need for San Francisco, although I really like the collection of young players that the Niners have there. Offensive line, especially along the interior. Wide receiver because of all of the injuries there. And then cornerback, I think, is a need for the Niners too because of a lack of depth. Now, John Lynch on Thursday did say this about the Niners making a move. We don't have to because we have plenty in this building. We'll hold down the fort until Bryce Huff's hamstring is okay. If it can help our team by making a trade, we won't hesitate to do it. But nothing has presented itself that aligns completely to this point. Look, it's as simple as this for me. If the 49ers keep winning and they're 5-2 right now going into week 8, you got to make a move. Because the Niners have an opportunity to do something pretty special this year, and I think that they can go head-to-head with pretty much any team across the NFC. And you look at how competitive the NFC is this year. It's so much better and deeper as compared to the AFC. I think there are 2 really good teams in the AFC right now, the Chiefs and the Colts. I'm not putting the Buffalo Bills there. Obviously, Josh Allen is an alien, but on defense, they stink. But in the NFC, look at how closely contested everything is. The number 1 seed, Green Bay Packers, 4-1-1. They have less wins than the Niners, Eagles, Bucks, Lions, Seahawks, and Rams, all at 5-2. But because of their tie, they had the better winning percentage and 1 fewer loss. And so they're the number 1 seed. And then you have the Bears at 4-2, the Panthers at 4-3, and the Cowboys at 3-1. Only 7 teams make the playoffs. And so for those final 2 final 3 now, wild card spots, it's going to be highly competitive toward the end of the year, and the Niners are going to be in the mix, which is why I think it makes a lot of sense for San Francisco to make a move to separate themselves from these other teams and make them more bona fide serious contenders. As for the players who the Niners have been linked to, according to ESPN, Trey Hendrickson, Chris Olave, Jalen Phillips, Logan Wilson, Arden Key, Kingsley Enagbare, and Christian Harris. Those are 8 of the top 25, so nearly a third of the players listed by ESPN as players who could get moved, the Niners are being linked to. And so coming up next, just around the corner, we're going to talk about those players, how they could fit with the Niners, and what Jeremy Fowler had to say about those players as well. Stay tuned for that, but let's get to our sponsor, our friends at Brunt. Those of you who have been watching the show for a long time, you know that I love talking football. I absolutely love the National Football League, and being able to talk about the Niners every single day is an honor. It's a dream come true. At 5 years old, I grew up wanting to talk about the NFL. But my entire life, I've really enjoyed hard jobs like woodworking. My favorite job growing up, working maintenance at a golf course, cutting grass, turning something that was looking a little bit rough into something pretty. And so that's why it's so important for me to have work boots during these long, hard days that are comfortable and durable. That's where Brunt comes into play, and that's why I love my Marin work boots. And choosing work boots used to mean sacrificing comfort or durability. If they felt good, they didn't last. And if they lasted, they wrecked your feet. Brunt thought that was BS. So they built tough boots that feel great from day one, no break-in, no sore feet, because people out there doing the real work shouldn't have to choose between comfort or durability. You should be able to get both, and Brunt gives you both. There are also a bunch of different styles in which you can wear. Founder Eric Girard grew up blue collar. He started Brunt Workwear after his friends in the trades kept telling him, Eric, the big brands, they stopped listening. They haven't changed in 100 years. They had sold out to become fashion brands. So his buddies encouraged him to start a brand built for them, and that's why all Brunt products are named after the guys he grew up with. These are no doubt the most comfortable work boots I've ever worn, and they felt comfortable right out of the box. No long, painful break-in like all those other brands. They're just not that comfortable. These are comfortable, and they're built to perform. Whether you need waterproof, safety toe, soft toe, pull-on, lace-up, Brunt has options that can handle whatever job site that you are walking into. And so here's the deal. We work too hard to be stuck in uncomfortable boots that don't hold up. So Brunt built something better. Boots that are comfortable and built for any job site. For a limited time, our listeners get $10 off at Brunt when you use the code CHAT at checkout. That is code CHAT at checkout. Just head to bruntworkwear.com/chat. Use that code CHAT and you're good to go. After you make your order, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Do us a favor and tell them it was from this show. For those trade targets, for the Niners here, Trey Hendrickson, obviously the biggest one linked to San Francisco. Jeremy Fowler on Hendrickson saying this, that he would be far and away the most attractive trade target if Cincinnati entertains a deal. However, a team source told ESPN, as reported on October 14th, that the Bengals have no plans to trade the former All-Pro. The interest will be there regardless, and the 49ers in particular consider Hendrickson an ideal fit. The Bengals record 3-4. The team is in the thick of the AFC North race. All the more reason to keep its best defensive player. Now, if that changes and the Bengals lose their next two games for a player who's on an expiring deal, maybe that will change their opinions on whether or not to trade him or not. If he's available, he's one of my top trade targets for San Francisco. Great scheme fit, and he would tremendously boost this Niners defense and this pass rush. I thought it was interesting that the Niners were tied to Chris Olave. Fowler said this about the Saints wide receiver. Rival teams caution that the Saints typically aren't dealing away players. That's not Mickey Loomis' style as GM, but the Saints have a 1-6 record. That could present opportunities to acquire future assets for a team clearly in a rebuilding phase. Olave has moved past the concussion issues, and he had 2 big play touchdowns in Week 7. He's making a case for a contract extension with New Orleans, and first-year coach Kellen Moore has an offensive background. He needs all the playmakers at his disposal. If Olave stays put, Rashid Shaheed is another Saints player who could emerge as a target for receiver-needy teams. For me personally, I wouldn't go after Chris Olave. 1, he's going to be looking for a new deal. 2, the concussion issues really concern me. To start his NFL career, he's in, year 3 now? He's already had 3 or 4 documented concussions. If there is a Saints wide receiver who I do go after, it's Rashid Shaheed, who's one of the most electrifying vertical threats in the NFL. A player who I do really like, Jalen Phillips, pass rusher for the Dolphins. Fowler said Phillips and teammate Bradley Chubb have circulated and trade rumors. Multiple teams I spoke with believe that Phillips would hold more value than Chubb's due to upside. A string of injuries stalled his rising star status, but he's working his way back. And there's this. Coach Mike McDaniel said last week that any Dolphins trade rumors are baseless currently. Now, with Phillips, he tore his Achilles last year. He did return for the season. He's been slow to get going, but in Week 7, he put some really impressive pass rush reps on tape against the Cleveland Browns and being able to get to the quarterback or at least affect the play. And he's a young player who's long, big, has great size. And again, I think he could eat as a pass rusher at defensive end in this Robert Saleh, Chris Kocurek system. Let's talk about a linebacker here, Logan Wilson. And he happens to be sponsored by Bear Performance Nutrition. Great brand. The Bengals are going younger at linebacker, relegating Wilson to a reserve role in favor of rookie Barrett Carter, despite Wilson's status as a team captain. Teams I've talked to believe Cincinnati is open to dealing Wilson, whose base salary is $5.4 million this season. Next year, he has a base of $6 million. So that's not bad coin for him as a linebacker. For a team taking on that price, it's actually pretty affordable. And I know after the Fred Warner injury that put the Niners in the mix for a linebacker, I don't think the Niners need to make a move there. Tatum Bethune is a stud. Really liked him coming out of Florida State. And I had said going into this year, if he gets an opportunity, he's a pretty solid coverage linebacker and a good linebacker against the run behind Fred Warner as a depth piece. I was very impressed with what he did against Atlanta. He might not be an insane athlete, but he's a good enough athlete, and he's really smart, really heady, plays the game with really good feel and instincts. And then I expect Nick Martin to get acclimated more over time. Jeremy Fowler on Arden Key, who was with the Niners and really resurrected his career with San Francisco after they signed him in free agency a couple of years ago. The Titans are open to trading players who are in the last year of a contract and not in the franchise's long-term plans. Key fits that mold. And if pass rush hunting teams strike out on big names, Key is a serviceable alternative. The Titans just lost rookie pass rusher Olu Oladeju for a significant time due to a fractured leg, so they might need to keep Key to offset that attrition. But obviously with Tennessee, they're one of the worst teams in the NFL, and they could look to get value back for a player who they would lose in free agency for nothing. Now with Key, he was with the Niners in 2021. And that year, he had 6.5 sacks. That led him to getting a nice little payday from Jacksonville. He was with the Jags only for 1 year, 4.5 sacks. But then he was added to the team by Rand Carthon, who was in this Niners front office and then was the GM of Tennessee. He had 6 sacks in 2023, 6.5 in 2024, only 1.5 this year, not really playing as much. Kingsley Enagbare, he's a player with the Packers who we've talked about a couple of times here on the show. He started in 2024, but felt the squeeze of the Micah Parsons trade, getting relegated to a reserve role. While Green Bay typically likes to keep its draft and develop talent, Enagbare probably would welcome the chance to play more elsewhere in a contract year. Now, he's a young player who has shown a lot of ability, still has some upside, and I think the Niners would like him because of that. But he's in a contract year. So I don't know if the Niners want to give up too much for a player who could be a rental. Then there's linebacker Christian Harris. As we go back to the linebacker well, Fowler on Harris saying this: a once productive starter has been relegated to a reserve role in Houston's defense due in part to injuries, but he is healthy now, still 24 years old. D'Amico Ryans is a disciple of the Niners coaching staff, and San Francisco might need linebacker help after Fred Warner's season-ending injury. Texans GM Nick Caserio is among the most aggressive deal makers in the league. Howie Roseman gets a lot of buzz for being the most aggressive GM in football. Nick Caserio, kind of right behind him. They're very creative with how they manipulate and work the cap. The same thing we said with Logan Wilson, though. I don't know if the Niners are going to make a move for a linebacker. I would put those resources toward defensive end and toward pass rusher. Now, for Harris, he would know the scheme. He's a veteran, has a lot of starts under his belt. And so over the next 2 games, if these young players struggle, if there's an injury there, maybe he could become a target that makes sense, and you could probably get him for pennies. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button here on the San Francisco 49ers Report. We're doing it all here on the show. News, reactions, analysis, reports, rumors. We're talking all things Niners every single day. Join the party. So a lot of trade buzz for San Francisco right there. Daniel Garcia kind of echoing the Niners' thoughts. He said, got to think long-term as well.
Mailbag coming up. Get to answer your questions, and we had a bunch. So shout out to you guys getting those questions in. I think we had 3 questions before the start of that segment. Now we got at least 15.
Let's go.
So
That's awesome. That's the people answering the bell. Val Brooks, put Purdy on bed rest. That's pretty hilarious.
Let's see. Yeah, you got some good injury questions, trade questions. Love to answer your guys' questions. So good stuff. Zypher getting another one in on Jalen Phillips.
Let's go.
BK from the Bay.
BK in the building.
In the building.
What's up, BK? Hope all is well, my brother. All right, segment number 3. It's going to be a good one. Some changes that the Niners have made offensively, which hopefully has led to a sustained change with the Niners' ground attack. And then we'll take your questions on the back end. It's all coming up right now. Who's ready to get into segment number 3? If you're ready, type me. If you're ready, type me. Hello from Perth, Australia, from Ned Stone. What is up, Perth? What is up, Ned? Aussie, Aussie, Aussie. Oi, oi, oi. G'day, mate. All right, let's get into it. Segment number 3. Continue to hit that thumbs up icon, like the video. If you haven't subscribed, do so right now. Chase, who are you starting, Lucas or Stout? Tough, man. Probably still Stout because I like the development that I've seen, but Chase Lucas has made that hard. That is for sure. All right, segment number 3. Let's get into it. Hey there, welcome into the show. This is the San Francisco 49ers Report. Chase Sr. here with you. And by the time that you're watching this show, I hope everybody out there is having a fantastic weekend. Coming up here on the show, the Niners have made some big moves, some big changes and adjustments on the offensive side of the football, and hopefully that leads to a sustained running effort that is more successful with this Kyle Shanahan offense. Also on the back end of the show, we're going to take your questions for a mailbag. Before we get to all of that, don't forget to lock us in and hit that subscribe button. This is where it's at for the best Niners coverage every single day here on YouTube. We'll also be live for a Niners-Texans watch party on Sunday. We'll do a pregame show. We'll be live during the game, live after the game. Spend your Sunday with us, and I can't wait to see all of you there. Don't just subscribe, by the way. Turn on your notifications. Hit all. Therefore, anytime we push out a show like this, anytime we go live, you will be notified. So let's start here. It has been no secret that the 49ers rushing attack entering Sunday Night Football last week against the Falcons had been horrible. In fact, one of the worst in the entire NFL. 32nd in yards per carry going into that game, 30th in rushing yards per game. And Kyle Shanahan's offense historically has been known as a dynamic, physical running scheme. And that's what Shanahan's been able to hang his hat on, is that once that ground game gets going, it opens up the pass game, makes life easier for quarterbacks, and you're able to have this balanced offense, which is one of the more difficult offensive units to cover for defenses across the entire NFL. And from a physical standpoint, Christian McCaffrey all year has looked good. He's looked better than last year. When even before he got hurt and after the bilateral Achilles tendonitis, he was slow. He didn't have burst. He didn't have explosiveness. And he showed the after effects of leading the NFL in touches in 2023 when he won Offensive Player of the Year. But even with Christian McCaffrey looking good, looking healthy, and by the way, going into this week, he's 8th in the NFL in receiving yards, it's been hard for him to get going running the ball because so often he's gotten handoffs and he's immediately swarmed by not just one defender, multiple defenders, because the interior of this Niners offensive line has not been good run blocking wise, and they've been getting pushed back and bullied. And so Kyle Shanahan and the Niners have made 2 changes and big moves to change this running game. One was the return of George Kittle. That's from a health standpoint, of course. He came back on Sunday night against Atlanta, and his impact was felt. The other, which we'll get to here in a couple of minutes, Kyle Shanahan adjusting his scheme. What makes an elite coach an elite coach? Well, from an offensive standpoint, obviously it's play calling, it's play design, it's the scheme, but it's being able to make in-season and in-game adjustments. In-game, depending on how the opponent is defending you and guarding you and what you're doing well, what you're not doing well. During the season, it has to do a lot with scheme and personnel and your experiences with how your unit has fared. And so with the return of George Kittle, he comes back against Atlanta and immediately he transformed the Niners' ground game because he's an elite blocker. Defenses need to account for him as a blocker, but also as a pass catcher. And when he is to the right of the right tackle, to the left of the left tackle, it takes less pressure off the offensive line. And you can also use him as a motion man in a variety of ways, pass catching wise, but to also get the ground game going. He also lends assistance to all of the other offensive linemen because he's an additional blocker. And the Niners have struggled to find other tight ends when he's been out or has needed a rest who can block successfully, which makes his impact as a blocker even more felt. And so even though Kittle had only 2 targets against Atlanta and didn't have a catch, you don't just have to catch passes to make a difference. The Niners went into Sunday night as one of the worst rushing teams in the National Football League. They came out of it hopefully finding something. And they found something partially because Kittle was on the field. And check out these numbers. When Kittle was on the field, the Niners averaged 1.4 yards before contact per rush. They ran for 151 rushing yards as a team, both of Christian McCaffrey's touchdowns when George Kittle was on the field in the red zone. Without Kittle on the field, the Niners' yards before contact, minus 2.1. And they only ran it 6 times for 12 yards. That is George Kittle putting his imprint on the game in a big, big way. And that's so important because this offense under Kyle Shanahan is at its best when it is balanced, when this run game is clicking, when this run game is humming. Kyle Shanahan has gone 17-7 with backup quarterbacks when his starters have been injured in his coaching career. That's insanely good. So many other coaches fail and flounder. And he's been able to have success with other quarterbacks because the Niners usually historically can lean on the ground game to make the job easier for the quarterback. And finally, last week, the Niners made the job easier for Christian McCaffrey. That's why he turned the clocks back to 2023. 24 carries, 129 yards, 2 touchdowns, 5.4 yards per carry. And so hopefully the Niners can find something from that game on tape and obviously have it be effective for this week's game against Houston, but also beyond. The other thing, too, is that the Niners had some explosive runs. For the first time this year, they came in bunches. The first 6 games of the year, the Niners had 9 runs of 10-plus yards combined in the first 6 games. On Sunday Night Football, they had 8 runs of 10-plus yards in that game alone. And when it comes down to the scheme, the Niners' zone rushing percentage, meaning zone runs, has gone down the last 2 weeks. Weeks 1 through 5, they called zone runs 61.2% of the time. Weeks 6 through 7, that number dropped nearly 20% to 42.6%. The change is that the Niners ran more power and the gap scheme was more prevalent than the zone running scheme. And so did the 49ers find something here? I've gotten this question from some viewers this week because we've talked about this at moments on the show. Chase, why did that lead to the Niners offensive line being successful? I think it allows them to just play more physical, less thinking, less movement, and they can play more north and south. And for Christian McCaffrey, it allows him to see hole, hit hole, get up and down the field, north and south more quickly instead of having to read and stress things out on some of those zone runs, which can take some more time, and it gives defenses more time to identify where the run is going, what the play is, to shoot those gaps. We'll take your questions on the other side. But let's get to our sponsor for today's San Francisco 49ers Report, PrizePicks, making this show hum along. Get $50 in lineups when you play your first $5 lineup. If you download the app, create an account, and use the code CLNS at prizepicks.com/CLNS. This is America's #1 fantasy sports app. Millions of users have signed up. You pick, predict, play. You can get your picks in less than 60 seconds. It's easy to play. All you have to do is choose more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you can win some big-time money. PrizePicks also has a couple of new features. It's the only app that offers stacks, meaning you can pick the same player up to 3 times in the same lineup. You want to pick more on Christian McCaffrey's rush yards, receiving yards, and touchdowns? Now you can pick all of them in the same lineup only on PrizePicks. You can also follow other PrizePicks players directly on the app, copy their lineups in one click. Whether it's a friend, a celebrity partner, or just somebody whose picks you like, hit the follow button and check out every lineup they create in the new feed tab on PrizePicks. Here's our 3-pick power play for Sunday. CJ Stroud more than 200.5 passing yards, Christian McCaffrey more than 51.5 receiving yards, and George Kittle more than a half rushing or receiving touchdown. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. All right. Let's take some of your questions here on the San Francisco 49ers Report. Chase Sr. here with you. So glad all of you are hanging out here with me. And I always enjoy opening up the floor and taking questions from our subscribers, our real ones, and the people who consistently watch this show. I know that you know ball, and this allows you to show me as we take your questions here on the program. So let's begin with this one coming in from Zypher. Man, Jalen Phillips would be such a great option at the edge spot. Not going to lie. And obviously you're talking about the Niners maybe making a trade for Jalen Phillips of the Miami Dolphins going into the NFL trade deadline. The Niners have been linked to him and other pass rushers going into the deadline after that injury to Nick Bosa. And I don't think the Niners can survive by not replacing Bosa and Fred Warner. I do think San Francisco can survive and be competitive if they replace Nick Bosa and then let some of these young linebackers play, because I do think there are some talented players at that linebacker spot, which brings me to this point, right? I think John Lynch needs to make a move for a pass rusher. And obviously Jalen Phillips is a really intriguing name. And he tore his Achilles last year. But I will say this about Phillips. I thought he put some really good reps on tape against the Cleveland Browns in Week 7, where he was able to generate some pressures, move the pocket, get to the quarterback. And physically, I thought he just looked really good. Of course, anytime you have a player with injury concerns, it's a concern for the Niners because they have their own injury problems that they need to worry about. But Jalen Phillips was getting off to a really impressive start in his career. 8.5 sacks in year 1. 7 sacks in year 2, 6.5 in year 3. And then he tore his Achilles in game 4 of last year. And then he came back in record time. And he's played in all 7 games this year, has 7 starts. He has 2 sacks, he has 2 TFLs, and he has 4 quarterback hits. I think he's starting to round into form. And this is also a player who is on an expiring deal, but fits what the Niners are looking for. A young player who can help them out in the future. I'm with you. I would really like to see him in a Niners uniform. Jeremiah Grady. What do you think about trading Jawan Jennings for Kayvon Thibodeau? So I don't think that's an equal trade if you're the New York Giants. Kayvon Thibodeau is a really good player. He's having a really good year. There's also this from a contractual standpoint. Kayvon Thibodeau has another year of contractual control and team control beyond this year in 2025 because the Giants exercise his 5th-year option. So he's going to be under contract for 2026 as well. Whereas Jawan Jennings is only under contract for 2025. He's going to be a free agent after this year. I also think when you think about player value and position value, edge rushers, so much more valuable than wide receivers. It's so much harder to find a premium pass rusher compared to a premium wide receiver because wide receivers in the NFL draft, they're not easy to find, but in this era of a bunch of 7-on-7s and a lot of kids growing up not wanting to be running backs, instead wanting to be wide receivers because of the physical toll at running back. I mean, there are so many gifted wideouts now who are entering the draft year in, year out. And then lastly, with Jennings, he's really injured. I mean, this year he's dealt with knee, ankle, and rib injuries, whereas Thibodeau has been pretty healthy. Now, if the Giants do lose against the Philadelphia Eagles, that will drop them to 2-6 this year, and that effectively ends their season as far as wanting to be a playoff contender. But it was never about 2025 for the Giants. They're trying to build for the future. I think they look at Thibodeau as a building block. I really like him as a player. I would make this move if I could make the move and decision. You know, Thibodeau in year 1, 4 sacks, year 2, 11.5. Last year in 12 games had 5.5. This year, 2.5 sacks, 5 TFLs, 8 quarterback hits. He's been pretty active. He's been lining up at defensive end, at defensive tackle. The Niners like to use their defensive ends in that manner, but I just don't think the Giants would make this move because it's not equal value. VC Nick, $2. Just play Oku, 5 quarterback pressures and 1 sack against Atlanta. So you're talking about Sam Okuwanu, who has a pretty fascinating story. And he really started to turn my attention toward him last year. You know, he had been a journeyman up until that point, but last year he really started to make some plays. He was with the Titans in 2022, did not play in the NFL in 2023. With the Niners last year, he played 16 games with 3 starts. He had 3 sacks. This year he has 1 sack. He did have those 5 pressures against Atlanta. Against Tampa Bay, he wasn't great. I like him too for his positional versatility. He could play defensive end. He could play defensive tackle. Now, I don't want you to get fooled by his performance against Atlanta, leading you to believe that he should be an every down player or a starter. I think he's perfect being a rotational player who gives you positional versatility. Went to Maryland, undrafted in 2022, looked as though he wasn't going to find a consistent job at the NFL level. I think he's turned himself into a very solid backup defensive end who, again, can play defensive tackle, and he's made some really wild plays for the Niners the last couple of years. RESP, any thoughts about us trading for a corner, especially with Renardo Green struggling and his injuries? So I've seen a lot of people in the chat saying slanderous things about Renardo Green. And he has been banged up this year. I will give you that. He had the neck. Now he has the toe. But the toe isn't expected to be a long-term injury. And he's expected to potentially be able to play on Sunday against Houston. Of note, I'm recording this show on Thursday, so that could change over the next couple of days. I know his PFF numbers aren't great, but this year, can you point to a bunch of plays where Renardo Green has gotten beat? I can't really. I think he's been a pretty steady player on the outside. And I think he's been a pretty good number 2 option opposite of Diamador Lenore. You think about this Niners team, it's not like they're getting gashed in the pass game with awful cornerback play. They've been a pretty consistent team at all 3 levels, and Renardo Green has been a part of that. Now, his coverage grade, according to PFF, is only 42.8. That does rank 106th among 112 corners. Obviously, that's not good. One of the worst numbers in the NFL. But he does have 3 pass breakups. That ranks 17th. Passer rating allowed, 67.5. He's only given up 12 catches this year. So I actually think he's been a pretty solid player. He was struggling a little bit during the spring and summer. And I think he's dealing maybe with a little bit of a sophomore slump, but he's definitely a starting caliber corner. Now, would I trade for a corner? I do think the depth there at that position isn't phenomenal, but honestly, I kind of like what Darrell Luter Jr. was able to do against Atlanta. But if one of your starters went down, the depth really isn't there. So that does concern me. Chua, what is up, Chua? How can we stop the Texans defense? So this is going to be difficult. The Texans offense stinks. And it's the scheme. It's the play calling. CJ Stroud has really regressed. Their offensive line is not good. I will say this about their defense, though. They have a really good defense. And they have one of the best edge rusher tandems in the NFL with Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson. They can cause a lot of havoc. They also have some really physical defensive tackles. And we saw how Vita Vea was able to take over the game along the interior against this Niners interior offensive line. And Mac Jones had a long day. The Niners couldn't run it. because Vita Vea dominated the interior. And the Texans have an opportunity to really control the game from their defensive line. Derek Stingley is an excellent corner. So I want to see the Niners continue to run gap runs and power runs and do less of the zone runs, which has led to a lot more success on the ground for San Francisco. A trademark for Mac Jones and Kyle Shanahan this year has been getting rid of the ball quickly to negate the pass rush, and that has helped them because of their offensive line struggles in pass protection. And so I think that's a pretty good formula for the Niners to take down that Texans defense and score some points. Jeremiah Grady, do you think Mike McDaniel will be in San Francisco next year as the offensive coordinator? I don't think so. Here's why. And Kyle Shanahan was with Mike McDaniel going all the way back to their Texans days. And McDaniel followed him every step of the way. And so they've known each other for a really, really long time. They are both on that Texans staff. And Shanahan was the receivers coach in 2006, quarterbacks coach in 2007, and then the OC 08-09. And I believe McDaniel may have been there 08-09. But then McDaniel followed Shanahan to Washington when Shanahan was the Redskins offensive coordinator. Then they went with one another to the Cleveland Browns because Shanahan was the OC there in 2014. McDaniel followed Shanahan to the Falcons and then followed him to the Niners. But here's why I don't think McDaniel would come back to the Niners. Kyle Shanahan's always going to call plays. That's what he does. That's what he enjoys doing, and he's damn good at it. Mike McDaniel will have an opportunity to go somewhere. He'll have an opportunity to call plays as an offensive coordinator, and it wouldn't surprise me if a team makes him one of the highest paid offensive coordinators in the NFL. Because early in his tenure with Miami, Tua was playing really well, and I think that Tua is completely mid. We're seeing that now. And Mike McDaniel clearly has lost the locker room. I don't think he's head coaching material. Maybe at some point he gets another chance. But he's not going to need to prove himself a little bit as an OC first. And the league is always looking for great offensive minds. And so I think McDaniel goes somewhere where he can call plays, have full autonomy of the offense, and get highly paid to do it. Tyler, could they trade away Mac Jones to a team in desperate need of a quarterback for high draft capital? The Niners better not do that, because we have seen the value that a backup quarterback can bring. Can you imagine what the Niners would look like if Joshua Dobbs or Brandon Allen had to start 5 games? The season would be over, and it's not even the end of October. With Mac Jones, they're in it because he's gone 4-1. He's played really well, and he leads the NFL in passing yards per game. And the Niners got him on a 2-year deal worth less than $9 million. Great value as far as the contract, great impact as far as the player. I'm not trading him away. And I'm not trading him away after the year because Purdy's also been pretty injury prone. He missed time in 2024, missing a lot of time here in 2025, and Mac Jones allows you to stay afloat, be competitive, and be a threat in the NFC. I value the quarterback position too much to trade away a player like that. Now, they do like Curtis Rourke, but he's not ready to be the backup for this team. Who you got on Sunday? It's a do-or-die game for Houston and a big one for San Francisco. Type SF for the Niners, HOU for the Houston Texans. Let me know who you're rolling with, and I hope to see you there for our watch party. All right, good stuff, everybody. Thanks for getting those questions in as part of our mailbag. A couple of super chats just came in. We'll get to those before we dip on out of here. VC Nick. Giving up assets for a new defensive end won't be worth the extra production Okuwano can already give. Atlanta was Oku's first start this year. Oku and Huff should play. Yeah, but you need depth. They have 3 defensive ends right now on the 53 who are healthy enough to play on Sunday. Okuwano is a very good rotational and depth piece. And yeah, you're right. Like, I'm not giving up crazy assets for a defensive end, but if you can get a Trey Hendrickson for a 3rd-round pick when you've mastered the compensatory pick formula, I'm doing it. If you can get a Tyree Wilson for a 4th or a 5th, if you can get a Jalen Phillips for a 3rd or a 4th, a Bradley Chubb for a 4th or a 5th, I'm doing it. I'm doing it for sure because it helps your pass rush in general. It gives you a high-level starter, and it improves your depth. Plus, that defensive line, if they can generate a pass rush, helps the rest of your defense. Joseph Ernberg, $2. What are the chances we see Watkins this game or this season? He was active against Atlanta, but Kyle Shanahan wanted to run it 30 to 40 times, and so they weren't going to air it out a lot. Against Houston, maybe that changes a little bit, but I think we're going to see him get ushered in a little bit more, and I'm excited to see him play. 4.3 speed, ball tracking ability, was having a good preseason and a good training camp before he got hurt, so I'm intrigued by the player for sure. All right, we're going to sign off. Thanks to everybody who tuned into the show. I'll be on KNBR tomorrow with Larry Krueger. So be on the lookout for that. The sports leader in San Francisco, a massive radio station that you can listen to pretty much up and down the coast of California. So I'll be on with him tomorrow. And then great content to come every single day in the lead up to kickoff. Then I'll be live for our Niners-Texans watch party. For Chip, I'm Chase. For the Niner gang, we're out. Thanks for watching. See ya.